I'm Alex Sims, and I'm Associate Professor in Commercial Law and I work in this building. My area is copyright law. And this session is what it says, uploading, downloading and freeloading, managing piracy, and it's been presented or sponsored by NZPAC. So, what we're going to be doing is, I'll just say the panellists' names, then they'll introduce themselves and give a bit of a blurb about their backgrounds and what they're doing, and then we'll have some questions that I'll ask of them, and then at the end, about 15-20 minutes, we'll have time for questions from the floor. So if you can just hold on to your questions until I say when, and there will be time. I understood that one of the sessions ran sort of over time and no one got a chance to ask anything. So here we've got Tim Riley, who is a corporate lawyer, and he was a corporate lawyer, now specialises in film, TV, federal commercial law, IP and media law. And then Leanne Saunders, who is a feature film producer and has produced Devil's Rock and is post-production for The Weight of Elephants. And then Vikram Kumar is a Chief Executive of Internet New Zealand, which is a not-for-profit aimed at protecting and promoting the Internet for New Zealand. And then we have Paddy Buckley, who is a Managing Director of QuickFix New Zealand. And I'm sure most of you have heard of QuickFix. And then finally we have Tony Eaton, who is a Managing Director of NZPAC, which is a New Zealand-based program for the NPA, Motion Picture Association. Okay, so you've got 2 to 3 minutes. I might as well start with Tim, just to do a bit of background. And then we'll go on.
I don't think this will take 2 to 3 minutes. My name's Tim Riley. I'm with a boutique commercial firm called Dominion Law in Queensland, two-lawyer firm, and I guess we're a commercial law firm that specialises in entertainment law and mainly cover music, film, TV, but anything connected to the creative industries really. I started out as a government lawyer actually at the Commerce Commission, and then I became a corporate lawyer for about 12 years, mainly in banking and insurance. And about 10 years ago, I left all that to become an entertainment lawyer. And my job satisfaction doubled and my pay halved. But I've never looked back. And so I work with a guy, Chris Hockard, who mainly specialises in music, and I mainly do film and TV. It's kind of how it works. But I do quite a bit of music as well. So obviously a lot of my job is copyright. A lot of my work is advising people on how to administer their rights and exploit them, how you make money from them, how to protect themselves. Mostly not so much protection as more of a positive how to monetize your kind of creative ideas, whatever they are, be it a book, a film, or a TV series. And I do quite a bit of writing articles. I used to write a regular article for Take magazine, which is a Directors Guild magazine, and that's folded now, and for On Film, and also the Techos Guild. For some reason I act for most of the guilds. I act for Actors Equity, Techos Guild, Directors Guild, I don't act for Sparta. And I've quite often written on the I'm quite interested in the kind of new technology, new media, and how it impacts on copyright laws, and particularly probably from the point of view of the people creating the copyrighted works rather than the people distributing them. And I've written on the topic a few times and have a bit of an interest in it, and that's a little bit for now, I think. Leanne?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm a New Zealand-based producer. So I don't know whether I really want to go into a whole kind of history of myself. So maybe what I'm going to do is just, if I've got a couple of minutes, so maybe I can just quickly talk about the Devil's Rock, and because I don't know whether that might help to spring a lot of later conversations. I produced a film called Devil's Rock, which was a genre film, which was sold to Metrodome in the UK, and it was also distributed by Vendetta. I previously executive produced through a low-budget program called Headstrong with Anne Timpson a couple of movies, one of which was A Song of Good, and the other one was The Devil Dare Me To. The Devil Dare Me To was done under this low budget model, but we decided to apply for a blow up because we thought that the market for that film was multiplex. It's an act to go out into multiplex. All of a sudden you need to spend another $300,000. So what was a $550,000 film turned up into an $850,000 film. But so it was a massive chunk on top of the budget to get released into multiplex. And of course, this is part of the problem at that stage of being stuck between changing models. That film took $235,000 at the box office, which was, you know, pretty modest. It was pushed out really quickly. It actually did quite well, especially in some of the centres, but it was pushed out very, very quickly out of the plexes. But it did actually really well on DVD. Vendetta did the DVD release for it, but at that stage, which was 2006, that the price point for DVDs was like massively higher than what it was now. Although we didn't know any of that at the time, so we were very, very pleased with the return that we got from DVD. At the same time, we did a film called A Song of Good, which was another low-budget film around the same sort of budget level, which was an art house film, and basically we thought, gee, if this multiplex film has done $230,000, there was no confidence that we were going to get anyone turning up to a theatre at all, or at least that was what the distributor was telling us, who was incidentally the same distributor. So we decided to do this experiment, and as a promotional thing, which was to stream it for free over a 24-hour period. And again, Vendetta was our DVD distributor, what was sort of the DVD, what do you call it, sub-distributor. But Rialto had not told Vendetta that we were going to do this, and so that caused a really kind of interesting situation when we got on TV at Close-Up, and at that stage the stream was provided by a sort of like an early, not quite VOD, but I suppose it would be an early kind of guy who was able to do a streaming sort of thing, very experimental. We thought we might get about 250 people to download the film because it was done over a 24-hour period, and then the next morning I rang up Kelly and said to him, how did it go? And he said, the guy has just been blown away. You've had 2,500 people stream your film overnight in New Zealand. And that was basically off the back of Mark Sainsbury and it being on Close-Up. And so we went, shit, that's a lot. I mean, considering that, you know, at that stage we would expect maybe, I don't know, 100 people to watch it at the theatre. To have 2,500 people watch it in 24 hours, and we were going, okay, is it because it's free? Is it because it's being promoted on TV? Or what is it? We didn't know. But of course, what happened for the sub-distributor is, because they didn't know it, that maybe is another whole issue that we can discuss later about the, you know, that whole changing model. And we ended up probably about 6 months later going to meet Vendetta and going to meet Jill and Phil, and because they withdrew from distributing it on DVD, and so that ended up being another whole kind of scenario. But after meeting Jill and Phil, realising that they were very interested in the whole digital, what was unfolding in terms of the whole digital distribution space, but the way that it was being handled didn't work for them commercially. And so then we went on to partner them with the Devil's Rock, and that's added to another whole level of my understanding of what we're talking about now, because I had a very interesting experience with that as well. Anyway, so that's my background.
Thank you. My name is Vikram Kumar. I work for an organisation called Internet New Zealand. We're probably a relatively unknown organisation in this audience. We're not for profit. We run the .nz domain namespace through some subsidiaries. And what that means is that we get a revenue source that is absolutely wonderful. It's independent of government, it's independent of business and commercial drivers. So we get this sum of money, which as a not-for-profit, we put back into the community and it allows us to think and talk about the internet for what we think is the best for people and organizations who use the internet rather than any government mandated or commercially mandated agenda. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about the internet, the opportunities, the challenges. And about a year back, when the new copyright amendment was put into place, we did a lot of work trying to understand it. We set up a website called 3strikes.net.nz, which tried to educate and tell people about what exactly the new law was and what it wasn't. Earlier this year, I went to a conference where the founder of Wikipedia, a guy called Jimmy Wales, he was talking, and he's quite provocative, deliberately so. And he started off his presentation by saying that Hollywood will be dead in 6 years' time and no one will care. And you know, deliberately being provocative, and most people think he's wrong, but it's really interesting to try and figure out why he's wrong and why he actually might be right in some ways. And just in terms of the kind of work that we do, it's much wider than copyright and piracy, but I just want to make 2 or 3 quick points before we move on. The first thing is that if we look at what was spoken, the discussion yesterday morning about the fact that government funding should be about cultural reasons rather than commercial reasons, then I think you have to figure out how do we maximize the cultural dividend that taxpayers will get in return for the cultural investment that they make, and piracy has nothing to do with that. In fact, piracy is your friend. The second is, I think that most people in New Zealand, particularly people who are working on films and TV shows, for them obscurity is a bigger problem than piracy. And to me, the third thing is that the very term piracy is a deliberate emotive term which is used by people to paint what is actually copyright infringement in a very negative light. And that's okay, because everybody wants to be able to give their side of the story. But the problem with using those terms and not trying to understand what the real problems is that we can't come up with the real solution. And to me, the real problem that we have is copyright infringement by people who are unwilling or unable to pay. It's a marketing problem. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Paddy Buckley. I'm Managing Director of QuickClicks, which is an online movie service we launched here about 6 months ago, if you're aware of us. What we do is we stream movies and TV, but we'll talk about movies today, to a range of internet devices in your house, computers and games consoles, tablets, smart TVs and that type of thing. It's a new model. It's a model that's worked very well overseas. Netflix would be the, I suppose, the organisation we'd look at in the US as an example of a successful operator in this area, and it's something that I suggest, and I think most people, many people, believe is the way of the future, if you like. It's how many people are going to watch their content in the future. I'd suggest that I'm on this panel because we potentially offer a legal alternative to downloading illegally or infringing copyright, and I might be able to share a few perspectives with you about how to perhaps make the most of new media, digital sphere and so on, in terms of the different rights that are available and how you might go about protecting yourselves, assuming that many of you are filmmakers and so on. So that's me.
Hi, Tony Eaton. My views are different to Vikram's, as you'll no doubt hear over the next hour. NZ Fact was formed in 2005, and we also are a not-for-profit organisation. The mandate is to protect and promote the screen community in New Zealand. My background is policing, and I learned very early on that there's only so many times that you can go to one house to deal with the domestic or that type of thing. It's about education. I would say that is the key thing that I've brought to this organisation, that literally in the last 7 years with support of the film industry in cash and kind, we've literally done over $5 million worth of educational outreach, which the anti-piracy trailers, we've done booklets, websites, we even created a comic book, and I've just released an educational DVD into the secondary schools and intermediate schools, and it's now being picked up and it's now going in the online networks of the schools, so it's into the primary schools also, which for me it's using the likes of Reece Darby, Tinuera Morrison, and also Ainsley Gardner, people that are passionate about the industry and want to protect it. So that was incredibly well received. This morning, if you were here at 9 o'clock and went home celebrating Father's Day, we launched the economic contribution report of what the industry's worth. And look, for that, for me, it's crucial to get an understanding of what the industry is worth and how we can protect it and how we can promote it. It's about building alliances that work for the domestic sector as well as the international market. We are listening to what you're saying as consumers, and look, we want the internet to work for everyone. That's the key. Thanks.
Okay. Just one thing I forgot to say, I'm as an academic, my main area of research and teaching is copyright law, so I guess that was why I was probably asked to moderate this. So I'm sort of like, so we've all got different perspectives on copyright. So, first question I've got is actually for Tony, and so the question is, who is downloading movies and TV shows, and why are they doing it?
Look, I think it's a yes, it does occur, and look, that's a tragedy for the industry. But I think in some ways a lot of it is now a myth by way of where we were 5 years ago, and there was not the content that was available legally online, that in that 5 years the studios and the New Zealand community have listened. We had iTunes 5 years ago, and that was the only business model that we did have. Literally in the last couple of years, we've now got 7 legal film business models, and very, very happy to sit next to a very good friend in the last 6 months that's now come into New Zealand. And that's crucial. The fact that an organisation like Paddy's has prepared to invest and to come into New Zealand to offer another legal alternative for you. In Australia, there's an awareness, intellectual property awareness fund that has done some market research, and in March this year they showed from the ages of, what is it, 20, let me just get it so I'm correct, that from the ages of 17, sorry, someone with glasses, from the age of, from 73 to 85%, people have become aware that they strongly agree that there's a huge awareness in the growth of legal alternatives, and that age is from 18 to 24 right through to 64 years of age. So I think in regards to the outreach that we as the film community are doing and showing that there is legal product out there, we're now starting to turn people around. As this report has shown, in 1 year we've had a 55% growth in the online media market for legal alternatives. Good news for Paddy, and we might be buying me lunch, but look, that just shows that if we have the product here and it is legal, it's priced properly, people will use it.
So Vikram, the Three Strikes website, do you have anything to add on who is downloading? Who is downloading, why are they doing it, apart from the fact that people either don't want to pay or can't pay?
I don't think anyone actually knows, and for all the research that I've seen no robust research that stands up to the volume of downloading or the way the methods are calculated for the amount of downloading losses that happen. We've spoken a lot with the industry, we've spoken a lot with government. We've asked people who pass laws on regulating and punishing piracy. We've asked them for what is the objective evidence that you have. And the answer is we don't have any. So I don't accept any sort of studies that demonstrate that here's the objective evidence of what it is. Nevertheless, there is, I would completely agree with Tony that one of the biggest reasons why downloading occurs, about 50%, which is TV shows out of film and TV, it's 50% is TV shows. It's because of the delay in transmission overseas and New Zealand. And it's absolutely well proven and well researched that people who go to the library actually buy more books. People who sample some media actually buy a lot more media. And we have, the more we can provide legal alternatives, but I think what we've got right now is a very small step, and I think it's in the right direction. But think about this. Look at what's happening in the music industry today, right? Well, within the next 2 or 3 years, there's almost going to be zero sales of music. That's what I would, very close to zero. Why do people buy music? So that you can listen to music when you want, where you want, how you want. But if you can get that provided to you as a streaming service for a flat monthly fee, the ownership, and so we're seeing this shift of ownership and the desire for ownership, it will rapidly start declining. And what happens in the music industry, I think will start happening to the film industry. So if you can get all the New Zealand films digitized, available across any device, anytime anybody wants, for a flat fee, I think that's a win-win for everyone.
Can I? Oh, sorry.
Just say, first of all, we'd like to do that very much. And a few interesting points here, though, picking up on the ownership point, first of all. I read, or someone told me, I can't vouch for this, but I believe it to be true, that the average DVD today is watched 0.8 times. So that means that people are buying DVDs and they're not even getting watched once, which is unbelievable to me. But what it shows is exactly this point about ownership. People don't care about ownership anything like the way they used to. So a service like ours, where you have a pool of content, you pay a monthly fee, much like Vikram's describing, it's just not on the scale yet that he's describing. But a service like ours, and I'm not naive enough to suggest that we'll be the only one in New Zealand, and in 6 months or a year's time I suspect there'll be several others, and that can only be good news for the consumer. But the point is that when you have a flat monthly fee and you can watch as much as you want, the need to own anything completely goes away. And you see this on the music side, and it's a little bit easier on the music side because the song is different from the movie, but you see it on the music side with Spotify and others like it, and it's a model that simply works. And as you, then I think, I don't want to render this debate completely trivial, but I think that some of the issues that we currently are seeing will go away. And they haven't gone away yet, they are not going to go away overnight. But there's also a technological discussion, maybe one of your questions can touch on this or we can come back to it, but there's a technological discussion as we move away from DVDs, which are very easily copied, and move towards the online distribution model, and films that you stream through QuickFlix, for example, are much harder to copy than a simple DVD. So there are many different strands to this discussion, all of which are, to me, very interesting. But the ownership point that Vikram made is a critical one. People don't really care about owning things nearly as much. And if you have content that's there and is available at all times to watch whenever you want, you don't need to own it.
And I think, I agree as well. And I think, like the music industry is a good example. Because the music industry had to deal with these issues a lot earlier than the film and TV industries are, because songs are much more easily digitized and easier, smaller files and easier to distribute. And we had, Napster came along in about the late 1990s, and that was, the music industry's response to that, the major labels, was to spend the next 10 years shutting it and other sites like it down and going after individual consumers with very draconian legal proceedings and taking a completely punitive approach to it. And they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and all of the major labels' business models are pretty much gone now. And I think it's very clear, and it is to a lot of technology business writers, is that was a case of failing to innovate and failing to see an opportunity and see how the market had changed. And what they should have done was license Napster, or listen to what Napster was telling them and what the consumers were telling them about what they wanted, and come up with a business model to meet that need, and they didn't. They went into shutdown mode and fought it, and to the, you know, basically the cost of their own businesses. And it is different for film and TV, and a film is a, you know, I mean, it's a much more expensive item to make than a song, and it's harder to distribute because it's, you know, it's a much bigger file. But these days, you know, download times are getting pretty small in films as well. But I think that, you know, the major studios and the other major media companies involved in film and TV, I think they should be wary about going down the same line the music industry did, and putting all of their energies into fighting it rather than trying to learn what's going on and come up with business models that meet it, which is what's happening. You know, with Netflix.
What we've seen is about Hollywood. If we just focus on Hollywood as the sort of the indicator of the way things are going, I think about it, the DVD industry represents about 80% of Hollywood revenue at the moment. And what Netflix found, and what we found to a lesser extent as well, is that the studios were initially hesitant to do digital deals with us because they wanted to, I suppose, I don't need to be rude about the studios with whom we have many distribution deals, but I think there was an element of looking at where their major revenue comes from, which is from DVDs, and probably looking to protect that revenue as a starting point. Now, I think slowly what we've seen is a move, a gradual embrace of the digital space, and the reality is that the convenience for the consumer is such that actually you just want to be able to press a couple of buttons on any number of devices and you can be watching these films. And now all of the studios are fully immersed in deals with people like us, and I think that's just a trend that's going to keep developing.
4 out of 10 movies go through the complete distribution cycle, makes a return out of that investment. So you've got 4 out of 10 movies only make a return to reinvest to make another movie. So that's also something that you've got to think through. In regards to,
I think the reality is there's, I mean, in New Zealand film industry anyway, they're not. That's not really the model, making a return to reinvest, because
even if you
and that's part of the reason that New Zealand films don't make a profit, and if the major funder gets recouped, you know, that's good. That's, you know, that's a pretty good result here. So it's not. I mean, it's, you know, like new production funding is coming in from another source. It's not. It doesn't really work that way. That money goes around and gets reinvested.
Can I just jump in there?
Yes.
I think that what you're saying, Tim, to a certain extent is true, but with lowering amount of funding available and with people having to make films on less and less money, then surely the returns from our films are going to become more critical, because actually what has happened in the past is that a lot of producers, directors, cast, etc. got paid in upfront fees. But the problem with dropping budgets is that actually the back-end return is now more critical than ever. I mean, that's been reflected in Film Commission has completely, I mean, sort of post-Headstrong, the splits now are far more generous towards producers, but then with the budgets dropping, producers are having to give away back-end to people who invest labour equity into our films. And also we're now in a situation where we've been reliant on soft money for a long time, and so with having to do co-productions, you're now having to give private equity, so you actually have to show return. So I think that, you know, returns are not something that we can say we're producing a cultural product, we're going to be 100% funded, we can just give it away, we don't really, you know, care. Those days are over. No,
absolutely, but, you know, then that's a whole other question of where those returns come from and why they haven't been there in the past, and whether piracy, existing piracy has got anything to do with low returns.
I think we've got one example here in New Zealand in regards to Sienna's wedding. Unfortunately, I did that investigation for 6 months, gave evidence in the court, and saw the gentleman be convicted in a district court. You know, that was...
Well, that's a pretty isolated example.
But again, it's one of the...
So that's someone stealing a, you know, someone in post-production house stealing physical property.
And that's the irony. It had nothing to do with the internet.
No. But in saying that, it is by way of
DVDs.
yes, it's stolen out of the internet, but then it went, it was stolen out of a post-production house, but then it was put on the internet, and literally in 24 hours, it was in 9 countries.
Right, but that's just you know, I mean, the internet is an easy distribution system, isn't
Absolutely,
it? So
but look, it's something that we've all got to work through to make sure that the internet works for all of us.
And I agree that was, you know, and that person, you know, I'm glad that they got caught and prosecuted, and that's theft. That is theft, you know. And I agree with what Vikram said before. I don't like the emotive language around this. I mean, the name of your organisation, for instance, it's not possible to steal. You know, you can't steal copyright. I agree that was, you know, and that person, you know, I'm glad that they got caught and prosecuted, and that's theft. That is theft, you know. And I agree with what Vikram said before. I don't like the emotive language around this. I mean, the name of your organisation, for instance, it's not possible to steal. You know, you can't steal copyright. When you say copyright theft, that's legally that doesn't make any sense, because copyright is an intangible thing that can never be stolen. And I think using the word theft it just kind of ramps it up, and I don't think it, personally, I don't think that helps the debate and helps find solutions to it.
Look, we're all about solutions.
That's a whole other.
We're all about solutions.
I've written stuff on that about use of metaphors and things. I think what would be at stake for producers, networks and distributors if downloading continues, illegal file sharing continues at its current rate? You see a future?
Well, I mean, the thing is, no one really knows what effect it's having, and no one, you know, not for every bad story, but there's plenty of good stories around, and you know, I'm against illegal downloading. I mean, I've never done it myself. I wouldn't even know how to use a peer-to-peer side of BitTorrent. It's not something that I engage in myself, and I do disapprove of it, but I don't. You just can't say what effect it's having, whether it's having a negative effect or not. And there's many examples of films that have got their success. They've got piracy to thank for the success, because the fact that people have pirated their film and it creates an online buzz, it creates a community for the film. People start talking about it, and people get interested in the people that made that film and start following them and see what they do next. And you certainly can't say every illegal download is a lost sale, and who knows how many of them are lost sales, or if any of them. I was just reading about an author who he was writing in a technology blog saying how piracy is just on that whole topic, whether it hurts your business. And someone wrote to him and said, "Did you know that your latest book is on 8,800 peer-to-peer sites?" He's like, "What do I care? I'm selling like 400 a day on Amazon or something, you know." And he said for that book he was making $42,000 a month. And so he was completely disinterested in the fact that it was available for free, because it wasn't hurting his sales.
I think
I don't know. It's just not an easy. It's not an easy.
I think from a content creator's perspective, my position is that, you know, you've got copyright infringement. You're taking away the fundamental right of a return on investment. If that person, that creator of that content, wants to give it away for whatever reason, that's his right entirely. He owns it, she owns it, they want to put it up on the internet, as what Ted Hope said yesterday. You know, he wasn't in China, the product was in there, it was getting him known, it gave him access in regards to other product, or into building up a name that when he put it out legitimately, he would get a return on investment. What we're saying is, by illegally file sharing, you're taking that right of that content owner away.
And I would agree with that, but then...
Sorry?
but the question is, what do you do about it? Because it's never going to go away. Piracy is never going to go away.
Well, we'll get on to business models later, but Leanne, do you want to, because you have your first-hand experience, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that there's a lot of probably filmmakers and producers in the room. Don't believe anything that anyone tells you, whether it comes from this side or that side. Basically, do your own research, because it's, I mean, on the one hand, you're going to have people tell you that it's very great for promotion, your title's going to be obscure, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. On the other side, you know, people say, you know, you must completely, you know, disallow piracy at all costs, and there is no one answer. And I think that these models, like there was a film called The Tunnel, where these guys went, you know, our film's going to get pirated, it's going to be on torrents, and they built up a whole campaign around the film to give away you had to buy frames of the film to basically build their budget, and saying it's inevitable on the day that you've paid for it, yours a ticking clock, we will put it up for free. And so they used it as a promotional marketing tool for the film, and as a way to raise money as well, because they said inevitability we're a genre film. But having said that, to passively allow that to happen to your film is also not right as well. You know, so I think that if you're going to spend a lot of time creating product, you have to be aware that there are certain things that will exponentially put your film out there on the internet, which I found out with my film Devil's Rock, which we sold to a UK distributor, and because of, you know, and it's a big question around promotion, distribution models, and there's no easy answers, but basically because we were theatrically releasing in New Zealand, the windows to get into a theatrical means that, or the slots to get into theatrical, you can't choose your date. You have to negotiate with the exhibitors who won't necessarily, you might want to go out next week, they won't let you because there's one of the other studios have got films in. So we had a date that was quite hard to move, and when we sold it at Cannes, the UK distributor went out extremely quickly. The film went out on DVD before we had a theatrical release here, and I became aware that through, you know, basically searches, that there was a huge amount of links to our film, and you know, it had the DVD cover and links to IMDb. It's all very, very slick, and what we were doing is we were doing a lot of online marketing. So you type in the title of our film, and then you've got, like, you know, within your page, you've got to click there to rips of our film. And for our demographic, which was basically 16 to 24-year-olds, I go, that's a pretty compelling reason as to why you do download, because it's like literally you move a mouse, and there's the film that you've had marketed to you right in front of your face. The other thing I became aware of, you know, why do people download, is that the cyber lockers incentive, you know, they have a model where they actually incentivize people to upload rips, and you're financially incentivized to put up material onto the internet, which then you get paid per click. So there's a business model around, so that the cyber locker businesses don't upload copyrighted materials to other users, but they're actually financially incentivized to do so. So I became aware of that and went...
That's mega upload style, is that cyber locker?
Yeah, yeah. So it used to be torrents, and then it sort of been the rise of cyber lockers. So yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, I think that as a producer, you just have to be very aware that promotion of your film is one thing, but, you know, there's a lot of quick things along the way.
Well then, how can a producer actually protect themselves?
Well, there's a legislation, the DCMA legislation, which is like a copyright legislation. So you can put out DCMA notices to any site you want to, and basically you issue them a notice saying that you're the copyright holder and tell them to take down the link. You could do that yourself, so I've done it myself at the start, and then I basically wasn't quite sure of how much I was seeing, because I sort of thought, oh, there's maybe 100. Then I employed a company to do it for me, and there was like 1,500 sites with my film on it, so you go and multiply that times the number of people, so for each site how many people might have downloaded it.
And I suppose the first thing to do is make sure it doesn't go out on DVD before you theatrical release.
I was going to say,
yeah.
just to jump in for a second here, what we see, Tony as well might have something to say on this, the different windows for release of films is quite interesting, because at the moment you have the theatrical release and then there's a DVD release. Now, we, as an online distributor, effectively we find that more and more films, the new release DVD films, getting given to us at the same time as DVDs, and I suspect that in the future what we'll find is that our window, which is the pay-per-view window for new release movies, is actually going to come before the DVD release. And there's no question that if you're making a film today, knowing as we do that DVDs are probably the easiest thing that there is out there to copy, what you should be doing is looking at the digital space. You should be looking at the different distributors and what anti-copying or anti-piracy measures they have in place. I can tell you that we deal with the major studios in Hollywood, and it's the very first question they ask. Every time that we launch our service onto a different platform, different device, the most important thing to them is the security measures. And they won't let us put the different films on the different devices until they're completely happy that there are adequate security measures. In layman's terms, that you can't take the device apart and take the film out. And that's the most important thing. So, for example, we're launching an Xbox, and I'll get a quick plug in here. We're launching an Xbox end of September. But the point is, we've been dealing with the studios heavily to make it so that they could get comfortable that when people are streaming our films through the Xbox, that there won't be any difficulties from a security perspective. And certainly, I guess what I'm saying is that when you are streaming a film over the internet onto any of our device, I believe that's quite a lot harder to extract the film, copy it, whatever you want to call it, than a DVD. So, given that we're also going to see a move towards this side of distribution and away from DVDs, DVD industry will be around for a while yet, but I don't think it's going to be with us forever. So it's just worth having all of these things in mind, and I guess looking at the online side of things, I would say that that's what the area I operate in, but I think it's potentially a safer area than DVDs.
What I did want to say was that that's all good, but I think that what we're seeing as a major problem is when you have particularly the very strong lobbying of Hollywood, where they've grown up in an environment in the United States where every time Mickey Mouse, the copyright gets exhausted, laws get passed to extend the copyright so that Mickey Mouse never comes into public domain. And so in the US, the Hollywood in particular, and what I'm trying to distinguish it is that everyone tries to mix the stuff up, that you've got small producers and you've got large Hollywood, and it's like the same problem, but it isn't. Right? The Hollywood problems, they're venture capitalists, just like Tony pointed out. Right? They're venture capitalists with a huge marketing machine, with a huge investment required to control their distribution channels. That's very different from an average producer in New Zealand. So if you look at Hollywood, every time over the last few years, they've always succeeded in lobbying the US Congress to pass laws in their favor. This year was the first year when they failed. And there's absolutely shock and horror at the moment in Hollywood, because this is the first time Hollywood was unable to pass legislation controlling what they saw as the problem. And so whatever you do, if you think of the internet as your enemy, if you try and look at this from a perspective of this is Hollywood versus the internet, and it isn't, but if that's the perspective, that's when you get Hollywood and the major rights industries coming up across everyday people. And this year we saw there were two bills, particularly in the US, whose short forms are SOPA and PIPA. They failed. And this is the first time ever Hollywood has failed to get laws passed of the US Congress of that nature. It's a tipping point. It's about people saying the internet is really useful for them for communication, for entertainment, for information, for commerce, for knowledge. And yes, the distribution of movies is one of those really great things, but it's not the only thing. And so whatever you want, and yes, we have to make sure that people can monetize and can get a decent return, but not at the cost. And they have no knowledge whether it's legal or illegal, right? They get safe harbor, they're not liable. And what Hollywood has done is try to impose liability on internet service providers, which makes internet service providers having to look at your traffic and track what you have to do. And that's what's trying to break the internet. And I'll give you a second example. At the moment, there is a trade negotiation that is going on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. And the US proposal that they put forward in the IP chapter is to allow content creators to create licenses over transient copying. That's a pretty technical thing, but transient copying essentially is buffers and caches, right? And so New Zealand at the bottom of the world, with 80% of our content coming from the US, our internet depends upon us being able to make temporary copies, just like your computer or your buffers can do. And now the IP chapter in the TPPA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, will allow Hollywood and content creators to make that a licensed product and put toll booths on us being able to cache and buffer these flows. So there are a large number of examples where you've got Hollywood and content creators creating new liabilities which never existed, new licensing opportunities that go against the very nature of the internet.
Excuse me, but, sorry, but aren't there new problems? So naturally they're going to have to be new solutions. You can't blame someone who's trying to protect their rights for trying to get government to implement new legislation when they're dealing with something new.
And what I'm saying is that let's try for new solutions, let's try for new business model, let's try. But if you do it in a way that breaks the internet, there will be a backlash.
But it's not. This is going to be interesting. But it's not. It's not going to break the internet because look. This last year, 5 of our top 10 international movies, New Zealand saw before the US. We've got TV stations that had Games of Thrones, the first season. There was a time lapse, and they were the subject of piracy. They listened, and Game of Thrones 2 in New Zealand, 12 hours after it was released through the US. X Factor was seen the same day. You know, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But look, we're seeing X Factor, you know, the studios are listening. And look, it's not about the studios. Look, it's about a partnership, a screen partnership. This report is, you know, doing well. We're doing damn well in New Zealand. We punch above our weight as we do as the All Blacks. We're punching above our weight in the film sector because people want to come and be part of it.
Can I ask something? If the industry is doing so well and that all the studios and everything are making such successful efforts to counter it, why is there a need to introduce legislation?
Oh, look, like anything, we want to make sure that we have people that there is always going to be 10%, if not more.
There are other things that can happen just from introducing something like this. You're effectively intruding on the privacy that comes from everything on the internet, which is kind of fundamental to how it works.
I'll disagree on that, and because in regards to any evidence captured in regards to an illegal file sharing activity that occurs here in New Zealand at this moment in time, it's all captured in the public domain. So there's no way that the rights holders here in New Zealand want to, and this is why we have to partner with the ISPs, because we're asking, the evidence is being captured by the rights holder by a third party, it's then given to the ISP, who the ISP then engages.
In fact, hasn't done it ever.
We haven't done it, no.
I mean, let's just get this clear. We've got a report that was released this morning. The introduction to the report says the reason this report is being done is so that the government takes more legislative action. 1 year back, the rights holders lobby got new legislation implemented. Hundreds and thousands of dollars were spent by internet service providers, which you and I as customers who are not infringing have to bear. How many infringement notices has the movie industry, and NZ Fact in particular, put in?
We've put in none.
Zero.
And we've said that to the government, that it has to be, the fee at this moment in time is prohibited.
And the music industry has put in 2,500 infringement notices.
At $25 a notice, Vikram, it just becomes unworkable. So what we've done is put money into education, because what we believe
And we
as
don't
one
need new
said,
legislation.
Sorry, but primary school children, in 5 years' time, it's going to be a completely different environment.
but you have to deal with the here.
Downloading something, they're not going to be downloading anything because files, as they are only going to get easier to copy, they're going to get harder. And everybody's putting them on hard drives and sharing them in hard drives, not downloading them off the internet. There's only a certain amount of people that are doing that. And then they're all just sharing files, right? That's what everyone's doing. Like manually, like walking around with hard drives. In 5 years' time, nobody's going to be having hard drives.
I think you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, do we put our head in the sand and not do anything? Or do we engage and try and educate the public to see the harm that, in my opinion, and other industry people, that we need a return on investment so we can make that next movie.
I think
What do you mean by education? Because I know that what I'm hearing through your sense of education is actually those trailers that I can't really skip on a legally bought DVD. That makes all my teenage contacts all go, shit, I'm going to download it, I don't put up with that crap.
Oh, you'll see that the messaging has changed. In years gone by, it was pretty hard, it was pretty heavy. Don't steal a handbag, don't steal a wallet, don't steal a car, don't steal a DVD type thing. Look, you'll see now that there's an embracement of the industry to people that will buy legal. That out of Australia, at the moment, it's certainly something that I'm looking at, where it's a thank you campaign, where we thank the people for actually paying for legal alternatives.
Can we skip the thanks though? I mean, is it going to be rammed down our throats or not? Because I don't believe it's education, I think it's publicity.
I mean, the other point about it is no one knows, the extent of the problem and whether there really is a problem. Your MPA, who you represent, are fond of putting figures out about what piracy costs the industry. And those figures always get routinely torn apart and jumped on, even by the US Government Accounting Office. And so there's a lot of hyperbole. I've never seen any hard and fast data that shows that piracy is having that it is the kind of problem that I'm not saying it's right, but that it's the kind of problem that you imagine it to be, and it requires the kind of legislation that you lobby for, that does impact on all other internet users.
I will just jump in as a moderator, as I can, is that the people that are buying things tend to be older demographic, because the young ones, they can just go on and do whatever. So the business model at the moment is being propped up by the older people above sort of 35, because they're much less likely to. So I do think as time goes on, while there may be no hard and fast evidence of what downloading is doing, it's going to have more and more of an effect. So part of it is, it will become a problem, I think. Mind you, there has been, the boy that cried wolf has happened every single time a new technology has come through, and it's never actually sort of eventuated. Those things that home taping is killing music, which it never did. But
when the VHS was brought in,
yeah,
when radio came,
so it's a whole. It's happened about 30 times ongoing. But I think this might be slightly different. But one of the things is there a way to encourage and support new business models? Because if everything is downloaded and no one's paying, there won't be no content, but it would be a completely different type of content being created. So is there a way of encouraging that?
Yeah. I think that once we start acknowledging the true nature of the problem, which is essentially what I would still call a marketing problem, where you divide it between people who are unwilling to pay and people who are unable to pay. And you start thinking of new models of engagement, right? Now, we're in the middle of disruptive change. But this isn't only happening with the film and TV industry. Just look at the newspaper industry, look at so many other industries. And change is disruptive, but change also is where new opportunities lie. And we've got people in this industry, in this room, who are absolutely creative and have the passion. And you can go out there and approach this in new different ways. It doesn't have to be destructive and breaking the internet and this versus that. It can all be really positive. So, for example, when I look at it, I think what the biggest irony I see is, we've got this $1.5 billion of government investment in rolling fiber to 75% of New Zealand. What is the single reason why people today aren't taking up ultra-fast broadband? It's a lack of content. And you're saying, well, hang on, We have the content here in this room. We can produce a whole lot of content. So why aren't we having these conversations, right? Why? And we just got this overseas, Hollywood and distribution. Where's all our local content? Why can't we use, we've got fiber going in. So where is our industry here thinking that in 5 years' time, how am I going to use this new distribution channel?
Audience is one choice. I'm just going to state the obvious. Audience is one choice. So just because people live in New Zealand, they don't want to be just watching New Zealand creative content. So, in the same way that I'm hoping that people in, somewhere in Brazil might want to watch my film. So there's a thing that, and we do have content. I mean, if you look at Twitter, you turn it on, there's a fire hose that's going the whole time. And you turn it on and you're there for your little wee tiny droplet. I mean, the world has proliferated with content, which has been amazing and terrifying at the same time for producers, because content isn't just creating movies anymore. I can see movies in a Facebook stream where people jump on an issue, and all of a sudden you've got 10,000 people jumping into an online discussion. There's a movie right there. And so content and interaction between us all has become incredibly rich. I agree that, I feel that legislation is a heavy-handed way to solve solutions. I'm very concerned about infringing on our rights to the internet and personal liberties. That's not what my aim is as a content producer. But I think that the solutions lie in things that we should be doing in the industry in terms of distribution, in terms of marketing and all the rest of it. And those are the key areas that we should be really focusing on. And continuing to work together. We have more and more people coming into our industry all the time, and we should be valuing those roles, marketing and distribution, and really understanding how we can capitalise upon this new era. And
Because there's also...
Sorry, Paddy. Yeah, we will. We'll just do one more.
Well, there's just a couple of things that haven't been said so far. So, as things stand at the moment, our service is the first of what I am sure will be many services that will end up in New Zealand. The content the level of content available to people will increase. Fibre will play a part in that as well, because it will all just be snappier and faster and generally better, and more content will become available. There is no doubt at all, and we've seen it with the introduction of iTunes and other services, more recently Spotify and so on the music side. Many people who download things at the moment don't want to be criminals. They do it simply because of the dearth of content available to them in New Zealand. Now, I'm not justifying that, it's just an explanation rather than an excuse. But the point is that as newer services come into the market, there's going to be a whole lot more content that becomes available, and you're going to sort of isolate the element, let's call them the hardcore element, and the people who are sort of in the middle, who say, well, I can't get this and I can't get that and I'd like to watch it, well, that's changing and evolving all the time. So I believe that in a way, it's going to become less of a problem for the mainstream people. You just have to look at the States, where Netflix is responsible for 30% of all internet traffic, more than than the combined total of the piracy websites, to realise that actually the idea that you have probably a subscription model where you pay a monthly fee, you can get all the content that you want. It works. It works for most people. So you're left isolating a sort of a hardcore extreme, and I don't think they can easily be stopped anyway.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. To answer the question, why do people download? To paraphrase my students, because it's there. But I think, and I rolled my eyes a bit when I heard these arguments over and over again, because we live in a curious economy that gives us the means to download and legally or illegally copy, from blank VCR tapes to recordable CDs to recordable DVDs, and it tells us we shouldn't be doing it. I mean, I think it's a central contradiction in the economy we live in. But I want to talk about one particular case about the notion of ownership. Because I was just reading the other day that the music industry is suing a website which is attempting to set up where people can resell iTunes. So they buy an iTunes for $1.79, they get sick of it, they want to sell it to someone else for 59 cents or whatever. They can't do it. The music industry is preventing that. So they do have a sense of ownership and a sense that they can on-sell or upgrade or whatever.
And if they also try to Spotify and they for $13.99 or whatever the hell it is a month, then they can listen to it all at any time anyway. I mean, my argument, and I don't know, but I think we can tell you, I wouldn't want to speak to you, but you probably, well, perhaps do as well. Ownership becomes basically irrelevant if you can access everything you want at all times.
No, they do have a sense of ownership. I've bought this. I'm no longer needing it. I'm selling to someone else.
But there's, and I would again distinguish between, I find it's interesting, but I find it interesting. Well, yeah, it's surprising to me because it's one thing to talk about your Led Zeppelin CD or vinyl perhaps from 30 years ago, but it's a separate thing to talk about digital vinyl that you bought, that you feel some sort of
well, they do have a sense of ownership. I mean, that's a whole New Zealand psyche. Why is the biggest site in New Zealand? Trade me. People on selling something.
Yeah, but digital
that will probably change. I mean, when you think like when you take a Spotify or a service like that, or a you know in a couple of decades, you could have let's say you can have every book in the world, every film in the world, every song in the world on tap. You know, you don't have to own them. They're there to listen to whenever you want or watch, on the basis of that kind of model where you're paying a monthly subscription, which is where it'll get. So you'll be carrying around in your pocket on your device every book that was ever written in the world, every film that was ever made in the world, and you can go, I want to watch that one, and watch it. You know, I think, but you don't own it, but because you've. But then you can watch it if you want to.
To share with things.
Yeah, but what you're finding with these sites, whether it's a Spotify or whatever else, they're becoming increasingly. They have, and my site's the same, by the way. We have one of the main principles is to engage the subscriber or the user. So that's increasingly becoming the case. We call it stickiness. So the more you engage them, the stickier they become. And one of those ways is by recommendation and so on. And it won't be very long before you can recommend you've watched something or you've listened to something, you can recommend it to your person over there, or you bump your phones together, or you smash your iPads, or who the hell knows what. But the point I think is that we're getting to the stage